This weekend marks 20 years since the High Court of Australia handed down its native title decision, which would come to be known as Mabo. That name has become synonymous with the nation's Indigenous land rights movement ever since. The legacies of both the decision and the man who came to symbolise the fight for recognition continue to resonate around the country. Natalie Perhunnan reports, and a warning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers that this story contains images of deceased people.
For Torres Strait Islanders, all life is interwoven and cultural values are expressed in the simplest things.
The island mat is weaved together by pandanus palms. Those weaving will never be broken. It's actually weaved there for this life and for the next life.
This weaving is being made as part of a celebration for a day that has particular significance for the people whose homes are in Australia's most northern waters.
Means a lot for me. A lot for me.
Betty Mabo is a traditional artist who teaches young islanders about their culture and her father's legacy.
Mabo is education, Mabo is community, Mabo is everything. Mabo is everybody's business.
Across the islands, preparations are underway for the 20th anniversary of the Mabo decision.
Mabo Day for me, especially when the decision was handed down in '92, it's actually about identity. It's about actually the recognition of who I am. It's not just me as a person, it's me identifying in my environment.
It's probably the most important day in the calendar, I think. We believe, Eddie Mabo isn't celebrated enough.
And so, with great reverence, Torres Strait Islanders will pay their respects to the memory of Uncle Koiki. Eddie Koiki Mabo grew up in the Strait on Murray Island. His wife says Eddie Mabo always championed the connection to his spiritual home.
We went up to see all these lands, and so you'll see a certain stone or a certain tree. That's our boundary line. And you go there and I couldn't believe it, All of what he was saying was right there.
And it's just heaps of rocks. These are small rocks that they've gardened and they picked up and they put them in heaps on the boundary line, like this. And that can be seen all over Murray Island.
It was not until Eddie Mabo took a job at James Cook University in Townsville that he had the avenue to combine his great passions.
A man who always knew that he was a significant person, he didn't boast or anything, but you always knew from meeting him and talking to him that he saw what he had to say as important.
Eddie Mabo was employed as a gardener, but he sat in on classes and became friends with lecturers.
Henry and I and Koiki were having lunch in Henry's room, and from that time he was talking about the land that he owned, 37 pieces of land all over Murray Island, and water as well, beaches and that. Henry and I looked at each other, and eventually I said, Koiki, you really don't own that land, it's government land. For an instant his eyes wide open and silently said, I'd like to see anyone take that land away from me.
The gardener was invited to lecture about his culture and his people's links to the land.
And if there's any questions that you want to ask, you feel free to do so.
It was as a result of Koiki's speech about how land was inherited on Murray Island that Nugget Coombs and Noni Sharp and others who were there came to the conclusion that this was the right case to go with to the High Court again.
Murray Island itself was a remote location, hard to get to, where custom and tradition had, relatively speaking, been sustained. They wished to assert that the ridiculous proposition that under Australian law they did not own their island, their reefs, their offshore areas. They wanted to assert that that was nonsense. They'd always been there, they'd always owned it.
Eddie Mabo died before the case was resolved.
On his deathbed, that's all he had on his mind was land claim, land case. Yeah, that was his last words.
5 months later, the High Court announced its decision. It had overturned terra nullius. Native title was instituted into law. Murray Islanders had won the battle for ownership of their land, but for them and all Torres Strait Islanders, that was only half the fight. In this culture where for thousands of years survival has been dependent on the bounty of these waters, ownership is inextricably linked with sea rights. This fight has already gone to the federal court and could well be heading to the High Court.
This just becomes a moral decision now about recognising the rights of Torres Strait Islanders in this regard. Koiki started that thing, 30-something years ago. It took a toll on him, and his family, and that sort of thing. You don't want to be wasted, and that's something we need to make sure we deliver. I think, or we die trying.